Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Wednesday, March 8th, our meeting of the General Government Committee. I will call us to order and begin with roll call, or I guess we can dispense with roll call. All three of us are here. All council members are present and accounted for. The first action item, our agenda is approval of our meeting minutes from our February 8th, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to approve minutes?
I move.
A
Moved by
second.
Councilmember Kathy and seconded by Councilmember Dahlhoff. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Our next item is the capital agreement with the Washington State Department of Commerce for the Puget Sound Habitat of Humanity Townhome Project, Connecting Housing to Infrastructure Program. And Brad and Troy, I believe you'll be walking us through that this morning.
Yep. So good morning, everyone. Very briefly, I'd like to introduce Erica Smith Erickson, who is our new planner. I know she met some of you at the previous council meeting, but I don't know if she met Joan yet.
Not
Good
yet.
morning. Hi.
Good morning, Erica. Glad that you're here. Hope
Thank
you get
you.
whip all these people in line and get things done.
I'll try.
Okay.
Again, as a reminder, Erica is sweetness and light, and I handle all the bad stuff. So if any issues or problems come to me, any praise or anything goes to Erica. So
Yin and yang, the dark and the light. I get it. I got it.
exactly. Thank you very much, Leanna.
My pleasure.
So moving on to the first of 5 topics that we have before you today, the first 2 are related. The first is a capital agreement with Washington State Department of Commerce dealing with the Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity Charleston Townhome Project. And what it is a contract with Commerce for Connecting Housing with Infrastructure Program, otherwise known as CHIP. And we were very fortunate that we were able to partner with the South Sound Habitat for Humanity and get awarded this grant to offset the costs of some utility improvements that are required for this particular project out on 79th. The grant is about for $726,000. The second item we'll be talking about is an assignment of agreements. So essentially that transfers the grant from us to Habitat so they can pay for those improvements. We will be responsible for managing the grant and making the reporting throughout the progress. But we are recommended action for the General Government Committee this morning is that you schedule this for your next city council consent calendar. I believe that's on the 21st of this month, not February 21st. We're not going back in time. So Troy, is there anything else you think you need to add?
I think you summarized it pretty well. Yeah, this is it's under the umbrella of the ARPA funding that the state got. Commerce, we had to apply jointly with Habitat for this. So they did the legwork in applying for the grant. It was awarded. Technically, it comes to us, and we are a pass-through entity. They are a pass-through subrecipient. And so, as Brad said, we have to kind of manage things and gather the documentation and get the audit, and they get all the money. The only thing concerning, not overly concerning to me, but a little concerning as the finance director is this project has already started and might already be done before we even have these agreements signed. And so just from the federal grant compliance standpoint, we're trying to play catch up, and we're asking for documentation and things like that. And they're being great. There's no, we have a good relationship with them, but I don't know how much they've dealt with federal grants. And so, if there's some documentation that isn't obtained or is missing, or they didn't do something properly in the bidding, that falls on us if we get any audit findings. So just a heads up about that. I'll do everything I can to not get in that situation. And a finding isn't the end of the world either. It happens, and this is a good program and a great grant to really help them out. So I'm really happy about it. And so if you have any questions, happy to help answer them.
Feel free to chime in if folks have questions.
So Habitat wrote the grant, Troy, made the application and wrote the grant, and we're signing on to be with them in this. Is that it?
Basically, they didn't necessarily write the grant, but they did apply. And so
Mhm.
Department of Commerce has, in essence, written the grant
Okay.
and done the award.
Yeah, and we worked with Habitat to prepare the information they needed for the grant application. So we've been involved since the start of that.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
I guess one question I have is trying to think back, which is challenging every day that goes on. Did we talk about this a while ago when the schematic, we saw the layouts and we're like, oh, if we could just do this or connect them to this. And then we're like, well, who would pay for that? Is this that project where the intersection when we're looking at what to do and who is going to pay for it? And then this grant fund came out, or am I talking about a whole different project? Is that making any sense?
I think it's a different project, unless it predated me, which is, I've been here for almost 2 whole years now, so.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah, Leetta, I think the answer is maybe. Because I don't
You know what?
recall
I'll
very
take
much
it.
either.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Well, I'm glad that funding was found to be able to do this. So it wasn't onerous on Habitat or the city trying to figure out how to get this project going. So I guess that's my thing is I appreciate the resourcefulness of Habitat and the city to get this project to go.
Yeah, and I'll just add in, it was pretty fortunate. Like Brad said, we were working with them to give them information for the application. And there were 3 rounds of funding. And the first one came out and we didn't get funded. And the second one came out and we didn't get funded. And I thought, well, this is over. And then I didn't know there was even going to be a third one. And there was. And then it got funded. It's like, oh, yay.
Habitat's a pretty stick to it kind of group, you know, they don't get discouraged easily. They just keep moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like Leetta said, I'm really happy this happened. I'm really happy about this project.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for, the project, but moving the 2 elements forward. The question I have is to Joan. We just had that conversation last night about placement on a consent calendar. Do you feel comfortable with this being on consent, or would you like the other council members to hear about this?
Well, I'm always torn on, keeping council members informed, and I always try to think, when was the last time we talked about Habitat or did any kind of updating? And I know it's coming up to be invited to their thing and all that. So as far as the mechanics of it and what we're doing, I'm fine with that. But if it's on consent, and it's been to committee, and somebody wants to know about it, we are capable now of speaking about it.
So Brad and Troy, will both this item and item 5 both have to be voted on separately by
Correct.
the council because they're separate agreements?
That's correct. They're two different things, even though they're related.
And is there an additional briefing for the next item, or did we just sort of cover both in with
We covered
two
both.
birds,
in
one
the-
scone, as I say instead of anyway.
Perhaps.
Actually,
Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, I guess we need 2 sort of separate motions for a recommendation of passage, and then it sounds like placement on the consent calendar for both of these is fine, unless anyone would like us to do formal.
well, for the first one, it just says schedule the agreement for consent calendar. So however you want to phrase it, I'll make the motion.
Okay, and I am happy to second. So there's a motion to place item number 4, the capital agreement with Commerce and Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity Townhome Project. Connecting
Exactly what I
housing
said. Thank you,
infrastructure-
Michael.
infrastructure program onto the consent calendar at our next council meeting. Is that right? Brad and Troy?
Correct.
All right. And I've seconded. All those in favor please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. So for item 5, is there a similar lengthy motion that anyone would like to make?
Joan, go ahead.
Oh, are we sharing motions this morning? Oh, okay. I so move.
All right. I'll second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion passes. All right, moving on to item number 6, the street tree plan, and to modern municipal code 12.24 regarding street trees. We're just receiving an update on this one.
Right. This is, we had an update at your last meeting in February on the tree preservation ordinance update. We're going to update you today on 2 of the other code updates that we're doing at the same time, overlapping, a little bit behind tree preservation, but at the same, we're trying to make sure that we have issues that come up on one, we can address them throughout the other updates. So if everybody can see my screen, I'm going to walk through a little bit about where we are in terms of the update for the street tree plan, what that involves, and then touch on some topics that I think, based on our discussions with the tree board and the planning commission, and also with the general public, that I think we'll be needing to have some council input before we come up with the final version of the street tree plan and some of the code revisions. As you're aware that under the urban forestry management plan, there were identified 3 different updates to the code to support the plan, an update to the street tree regulations in 1224, and also an update to our current street tree plan from 2002 were things that we were tasked with doing. And so what I want to sort of walk you through the things that were in your packet. So if you've had any questions from your packet, if you'd like to interrupt me at any time with any questions, that'll be fine. In your packet, I believe we included the copy of the gap analysis that the consultant did, which they basically looked at all our documentation, said, here are some things we might want to update, and then also with a copy of the public participation plan. The framework for the street tree plan is very similar to the one that we did in 2002. A little bit of an introduction and background, discussion of the policies and regulations that are applicable. We talk about the implementation side of the plan, and what that really involves is sort of multi-layered, because there is the intent of this plan is to sort of lay out in detail how we deal with street trees in the city, but at the same time, we'll have additional shorter documents that help, say, a property owner or a single family resident understand and what to do with their street tree. And then more detail as we need to for, say, larger organizations such as PSC that, would be dealing with street trees when they deal with their line maintenance, and city staff who are dealing with right-of-way. So in the plan are going to be a discussion of tree care and preservation, and also an acceptable list of street trees going forward. So, and that will also include details on proper planting and initial care. So, apologies. So some of the priority topics that we've had for discussion when we started this with the Planning Commission and Tree Board in January was a definition of street tree. That seems to be kind of obvious, but it's a little more nuanced than that. So there's the traditional definition of a street tree, say between the curb and the curb gutter and the sidewalk in a boulevard. There's the street trees that like on Little Rock that are in the middle of the road. And then there's also, what do we do with unopened right-of-way and other trees that say are in the right-of-way but don't appear to be your typical street tree that we maintain. So we're looking at all of those kinds of things as part of the plan about how to address those issues and maintain those things. One of the other big topic, and this is, I think, the first one I'm going to flag for council attention, is the maintenance responsibilities for street trees. under our current code, the adjacent property owner is responsible for upkeep and maintenance of street trees that are in the right of way in front of their house, business, or so forth. It is clear that in some cases that can be a burden. Not everybody has the resources to spend to make sure that those trees are adequately maintained, or if there's an issue, how to deal with that and that kind of thing. So I think as part of our discussions, we'll need to be coming back to council for some discussion about what programs could we offer to support those who need additional assistance, and how do we determine what is the threshold for requiring that, and so forth. One of the things we discovered when we were doing our street tree inventory a few years back was, for the most part, over half of the street trees in the city and the public right of way have some sort of infrastructure issues, raised sidewalks, broken curbs, those kinds of things. So there are other issues besides just the maintenance of the street trees that we need to consider, and how we're going to address those. So I'm just going to flag that as an important topic for future discussion with the council.
So Brad, can I
And it's
ask a question here?
Sure.
So the street trees that are in the right of way, and the, residents are to care for it. Are we going to remove those trees and plant according to our thing? I mean, or are we going to just look and see which ones need some assistance or help or encouragement or, repair or whatever?
Yeah, that's a good question, and thank you for asking that. No, the intent of the plan really is, first of all, to guide the planting of new street trees in new development, number one.
Mhm.
Number two is, as needed in the future, if there are issues with street trees, they're the wrong ones in the wrong spot or that kind of thing, what do we do and how do we replace those as needed? And then the third element is the ongoing pruning and maintenance of the existing trees so they don't become problems as much as possible. So we're not calling out in the plan that we're going to remove the problem trees now. We're just, as we've been doing, we're going to deal with them as they come up. But we wanted to have some framework about how we could do that.
I see. But we are going to actually remove street trees to put in different species or different things. I'm trying to remember what you said before. So in the case of a sidewalk or something, are we just simply taking out that tree, repairing the sidewalk and putting in a more appropriate tree?
It depends on the situation. I think in some cases, there may be things we can do to work around the existing tree in the sidewalk. In some cases, what if they've been planted incorrectly, or it was the incorrect species, or a number of reasons, we may have to take out the tree, fix the sidewalk or the rest of the infrastructure, and replant with a more appropriate species. We've done a couple of site visits. Well, both the tree board, planning commission, and our consultant have gone out and looked at various sites and that have been identified through our public works department about, here are some issues. What do we need? We need to be aware of these and how do we address those? It was clear in some cases that unfortunately those trees probably should come out because they're just not in a good spot for their health or for the fact they're just causing really big damage to the sidewalks. In other cases, I think we could look for workarounds where we don't have to remove the tree, but that may be an option.
I see. So the trees that are perfectly healthy, but they're causing an issue in infrastructure, whatever, do they have to be killed, or can they be replanted somewhere else in the city or in a park or in a, somewhere? Could they, rather than just destroyed?
Yeah, no, again, that's also a good question. I think depending upon the age of the tree and the extent of how they've grown, there may be possible to look at doing that. I'm thinking of some examples where I don't see how that would be possible because the trees themselves probably are not in a good state because of how they've been growing with their root system and everything else, and being able to replant them successfully is probably not a really high likelihood of them being able to succeed. So I think we could evaluate that on a case by case basis, but probably I won't be saying that we will be able to do that for every tree.
Mhm. Well, I'd like to recommend that we give it that kind of a look and see before
Mhm.
we decide for sure what to do. That'd be great.
So as I started to say, what is a street tree? For our definition purposes, we've called it a tree planted along the edge of a right of way or easement, or just inside a lot or a parcel from the right of way easement. And it's a variety approved by the city for such placement. So we're really trying to focus on the trees that are within our right of way for the street tree plan. So for on this diagram here in our improved right of way, we have the street, we have our traditional boulevard, where we have, when we think of a street tree, this is typically where we think it's planted between the sidewalk and the street. There are a lot of other options for this. And one of the things I know we've looked at for sidewalk improvements within the city is where we can, or if we can't do this traditional arrangement, or we have a wandering path or something else, trees would also be a part of that. And those trees would be considered street trees, even if they don't fit this model. This unimproved right-of-way portion is another thing that we wanted to consider, because it is a city responsibility, or a property owner responsibility, to work together to maintain those trees. And these trees also they sometimes will cause issues outside of if there's not enough space, but we need to be able to understand how to deal with these. The stuff that's on the property itself, outside of the right of way, that's a different issue entirely. We're not going to address that as part of the street tree plan. But we have our tree protection ordinance and some other things that's the mechanism for addressing those. In the existing ordinance, it's a very short piece of code. It basically establishes the authority for doing this. Councilmember Dahlhoff.
Thanks, Brad. I'm just wondering on that last graphic, and I read this plan, but now I feel like I haven't read this plan. Where we're planting the trees, right? Knowing that, are there certain trees that are causing more havoc on our sidewalks? And is that part of our design element as well? Is why do we keep putting trees where we know we're going to have issues down the road, right? And so wouldn't we want it more towards the unimproved right of way versus in between the road and the sidewalk? I mean, so is that part of that logic as well moving forward, is stop creating the problems that we're doing ourselves?
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that we've been thinking about, because in some cases, for some trees, putting it into that small space doesn't work. It works for the first 10 years, and then suddenly you realize that's going to be much bigger than the space it has. It may also come down to a question of tree selection. Smaller trees make much more sense than larger trees, and also the kinds of what those trees, their root structure, and a whole bunch of other things come into play about what's the most appropriate in, say, a limited space. The other thing that we've been looking at is sort of a defined tree well in the boulevards. In a lot of cases, in older developments where they have the grass right up to the tree, that creates issues, because when you do, maintaining the grass and cutting that back, you also can potentially damage the tree. If we allow for enough space between any grass or anything else by defined boulevard, tree areas, that's another way we want to get at that. The one,
go ahead, Brent.
sorry, one moving part in all of this is, we know we're going through lots of changes because of climate change. And so the tree board has been very strongly in favor of, we need a more variety of trees. We can't rely on a limited number, and because we don't know what's going to happen. And what works now may not work in 10 to 15 years. So we're trying to figure out how to best manage all those things as part of this process.
Well, I was wondering with that, Brad, will that be when we update our website with those elements? Will there be like a matrix of if this is your area, like this is recommended trees and shrubs and undercover for the space that you have? So we're not creating problems 10, 15 years down the road where we're going to have to remove something that was planted that we tried. Okay.
Yeah, no, that is definitely part of this project. One thing that does come up a lot is the proper planting at the initial stage of putting the tree in. There's
Right.
a number of steps that need to occur, and the tree needs to be planted at the right depth. The roots need to be exposed to the right degree. There needs to be a tree barrier, root barrier in place, those kinds of things. So I think we're looking at probably more inspections initially to make sure things are done properly. Also, because I think, it was clear from looking at the number of trees we looked at on our field trips that there was incorrect planting. It was the correct tree, but not done right. And so
Right. You had talked
We're
about that,
trying-
Brad. I would love to see that in this, however this is developed, that we have the experts and staff who helped our community get those trees planted, the right trees planted properly, right, for success, right? To
Mhm.
have that assistance or whatever that looks like and calculating those costs of staff time to help with that.
Yeah, that's definitely part of this process. One other issue I'd like to bring up that we're also talking about is in some cases, we'll need to have some level of irrigation to get the trees going.
Right.
But we don't necessarily want to rely on irrigation in the boulevards going much beyond initial establishment because that's subject to failure, who's responsible for fixing it and all that kind of stuff become really big issues. And the effectiveness of those systems after a while is much diminished. So we're also really looking for species that can manage without additional irrigation help as much as possible.
Thanks, Brad.
So as part of the existing ordinance and things that we're going to be updating, there's a jurisdiction and authority that's established by the ordinance, a prohibited tree species. There's some that we just don't want for a variety of good reasons for, dealing with conflicts with infrastructure and everything else. How do we deal with trees that have become a nuisance? How do we appropriately remove stumps and roots? And then the enforcement of all this. I think we've talked a little bit about some issues I think the council will need to weigh in more on, and that's the first one was responsibilities and assisting people. And the second is enforcement, because we'll need to make sure that if we're going to be establishing the rules and making sure that we have the education program to let people know what's going on, that we also have an adequate enforcement side to make sure that if there are issues that we're dealing with those.
Enforcement meaning letting people know what the city is responsible for and what they're responsible for as far as helping to maintain the tree.
No, that would be the first phase, which is the education, making sure everybody understands their responsibilities. The enforcement side would be making sure that for those people who ignore the rules, there are consequences for doing that. So that's it's sort of like making sure that after the fact, if somebody breaks the rules, that we have a mechanism in place for effectively dealing with that in a timely manner.
That breaking a rule, I'm not sure what, after we've planted the trees, you're saying they break a rule about what we
If-
planted?
Yeah, if, for example, somebody removes a tree and they do so
Oh.
without the city permit or and not replace them, that would be an enforcement issue.
I'd suggest
Uh,
one of the things that, trees don't like to be alone. And I know that sounds crazy to some people, but it's true. Trees are like to share root systems and do all kinds of things. And so I think it's really important that we, as you're looking at this, that we're looking for trees that do well by themselves. If you're just going to put them out in a little spot, and trees don't like confined spaces either. So we have to be really really careful, I think, for this, for the health of
Mhm.
the tree. And so, and that's why when Leetta brought up, look at those other 2 trees in that, one of those previous slides, they're back a ways, and so they wouldn't be on the street side, so to speak, of the sidewalk. They would have more space. I don't know. And I know that's true in some parts of the city. And those trees usually flourish more easily. So just a comment.
Mhm. So as part of the update process, again, we've talked about the street tree definition being updated. We're also going to be updating how we handle permits for tree removal within the street and so forth. Ongoing management standards, the consistency with the other codes that we've been discussing. And again, we touched on the violation updates if the codes aren't being followed. Next steps in the process. Let me see if I can stop share here. There we go. Next steps in the process, we've started, we like the tree preservation ordinance, we've had scheduled 3 different community conversations with the public. The first one was last week. The next is on March 20th on Monday at 7. That's a hybrid meeting, so in person and also remote. And the third community conversation will be April 27th. In addition to that, we've had a couple of stakeholder meetings internally with our maintenance staff to talk about the update and where we're going. This afternoon will be our second discussion of that. And our intent is to develop this and to have the plan and the ordinance ready for discussion by the Planning Commission in June. The reason for the June deadline is that we have a DNR grant for $25,000 to help us with this program. One of the deliverables for that grant is an initial draft of the plan, because the grant will be ending at the end of June of this year. So we need to have something before them. It doesn't have to be the final adopted plan, but it has to be pretty well baked. So we can fulfill our grant obligations and get the grant award for that. Any questions on any of the things that we touched on?
Could you say those dates again, Brad?
Sure. The second community conversation will be March 20th at 7 p.m. It'll be in person at the fire training room and also hybrid. And the third meeting will be April 17th, also at 7 o'clock, also in the fire training room, also hybrid.
Okay. Do people have to register for those, or how does that work?
Yes, if they can, we will, they have to register, but once they're registered, they'll be part of our ongoing mailing list of updates for these particular projects. So that's another advantage to registering.
Okay, thank you.
Along with Joan's comment, Brad, I know Nancy Stevenson, former historic commissioner, former planning commissioner, is still interested in participating in that. And I saw her the other week and I felt like she said that she hasn't heard anything for a bit. So I just want to make sure that she's still included on those because she still actively wants to engage. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I will definitely make sure that Nancy's part of that.
Thank you.
We have 2
Right.
Nancys in this community that are really both literally dig in to this
And
topic and
for
project.
the most part, I try to make sure that they're included in every mailing list of every project we have. So if I left out Nancy Stevenson, that's my fault.
Well, I mean, she was gone for a month, so she could be behind.
Are there any other questions before we move on to the landscape code update?
Just great work and excited that we're moving forward.
Agreed.
I think we've learned some things along the way too, which is going to be helpful in
Sure.
all this.
All right, well, with that, I don't think there's any action needed from us, correct, Brad?
That's correct. This is just an update to let you know where we are in the project. As we're moving forward, again, we want to make sure we check in with the council. So you know where we are, so we don't take a direction that you're not comfortable with, or if you have questions, we can answer those.
And
first-
we appreciate that very
Yes.
much.
Your first meeting on March 20th, I think it's appropriate. You're having, excuse me, a tree meeting. It's the first day of spring,
Mhm.
unless it was a flower meeting.
Even though the pocket gopher saw its shadow.
Yeah, right.
All right, well, with that,
Oh.
let's move on to the next item, the landscape code update.
All right. So I'd like to, again, share a presentation about the landscape code update. This, again, is a discussion item for the General Government Committee, just to let you know where we are in the process with this. So what we're doing with the landscape code, and just as a reminder, the landscape code is intended to address primarily new development or redevelopment of property for industrial, commercial, multifamily projects, or say large public projects. The landscaping code does not apply to single family development in the sense of the individual lots. The common spaces, yes, but not the individual lots. Again, this is a part of our urban forestry management plan update action items. We have not really looked at the landscaping code in a while, and it's from the gap analysis that the consultant has prepared. Our code is in pretty good shape, but there are some things that have occurred, better practices, other things we should consider that I think make it worthwhile to do this update at this time. And also we want to make sure that this is a workable code, not only for those who are, doing the planting and designing and so forth for the individual projects, but also for our project review staff. It's an easy to understand and make sure that we're doing the right thing as part of the update. Pardon me. So the update is really kind of drawing from a number of different sources. We've got the urban forestry management plan that sets a lot of the ground rules for things that we're looking for on the tree side and some of the vegetation. But we also are drawing from our policies and our comprehensive plan and our sub-area plans. Each of these have a varying degree of requirements and expectations for how landscaping and buffering will be employed on the site. Landscaping plays a number of different roles. It's an aesthetic thing. It's also a way to buffer higher intensity uses from each other, or from other lower intensity uses. It's a way of addressing stormwater where we can. And it's also plays a role in the planting of new trees on projects and the maintenance of those. So it covers a lot of things down the line that we want to make sure that we get right when we're doing this update.
Can I ask in that list of things, oh, I see it there, that you ran through, it's an opportunity for preservation, or even setting aside land in your development or creating, not that we can, I don't know, I just wonder in some of the developments and things I've read about and I've seen, and I'm not sure how we've done it in Tumwater, but developments have gardens or have ways that they have done water retention or things that are beautiful, and also they've retained groves of trees and things like that. I don't know if we encourage some of that, or if when we're looking at this, we could also add the possibility of preservation to our guidelines or our suggestions.
Yes, and actually this plays with some of the other things that we're doing as part of the update process. As part of the tree preservation, we obviously want to retain more trees, existing trees in project areas, and how we do that and how we can incorporate those into the landscaping requirements is where those two codes really work together. Another thing that we have that the council updated if not a few years back was our open space requirements for all projects. There's a certain percentage of a site that needs to be set aside for active and passive open space. And where the landscaping code comes into that is what goes into those open space areas. I mean, how those are dealt with, what kinds of things are planted there and that kind of thing. So we were trying to, there's a lot of things that we're bringing into the code that, well, this may just say cover the plant list, say, for example, the planting those areas or how those things, but there are other connections to the code that we have, and we're trying to make sure that we keep as part of this process.
That's great.
I mentioned that we've got a number of other things that are going on at the same time with, in an urban area, we don't have the luxury necessarily of having one kind of thing occur in one area. We want to get as many bonus points as possible from multiple things in one space. And one of the things we're also really looking at is how we can interact better with our stormwater code in our landscaping code. Basically making sure that it goes two ways. One, that the areas that are required for landscaping function in some way to support the stormwater system. And on the other side is make sure those stormwater facilities are landscaped to such a degree that they become more than just a hole in the ground, or they can become some form of either usable space or can be planted to such a degree that they have other benefits. That's definitely something we're looking at. We're also looking at how the landscaping and the other site design elements, such as the building and surface parking and so forth, work together. How can we make this work even better than it is currently? And also, as we mentioned, the tree preservation side of things is also something we're really focusing on. How can we incorporate those into required landscaping?
What do you mean about parking?
Well, when we're laying out, or when an applicant is laying out a site for development, we have required elements. They have the structure that they're building for whatever purpose, whatever required parking they have, and other features that they're putting in. We want to make sure that the landscaping code deals with landscaping requirements within parking areas to ensure that we don't create a big heat island. That is aesthetically, it works better. And also, as much as possible, if there's ways to make sure that the stormwater requirements for that large amount of parking space is done in such a way that it also functions as an aesthetic way for through the landscaping code, or provides trees and so forth within those areas, appropriate trees.
Mhm. Thank you. It's good.
So we're, in addition to the code updates to 1847, we're also looking at our development guide and things that we could potentially be updating to support this work. This also is similar to other things that we're doing with the tree preservation and the street tree. There's a lot of interaction between our development guide, which is essentially the construction details that projects have to follow on the engineering side to build particular things, and our requirements that come through the urban forestry plan. We're looking at ways that encourage and support our tree city and backyard habitat efforts. We're also looking at how illumination, maybe we make some changes to that, to how do we deal with that within the landscaped areas. We're looking again, obviously, at street trees, is how this interacts, as well as the stormwater drainage manual. And last of all, probably most importantly, is how we deal with irrigation. For the most part, we require irrigation to get the landscaping established for a 3-year period at the beginning of any project. We also had a pretty big push for, do we really want to be requiring irrigation going forward? Because again, that's a substantial amount of water during the summer months. And as our climate is changing, is that really appropriate for us to continue to do? So that's underlying big discussion topic 37 of the landscape ordinance update process.
You mean,
And
do
this-
we You mean, do we want to be responsible for it or,
Well, do we
mean,
want to be, do we want to be requiring particular kinds of landscaping that require irrigation? Or do we want to move in a different direction that reduces what are requirements for, plantings that need water during the summer months? And that really goes into the whole sustainability consideration discussion about water efficiency and conservation, alternative landscaping methods that have been discussed. How do we prioritize native and Northwest adapted plants that may not need that level of irrigation? Things that we can do. Also, outside of that would be encouraging composting, strongly encouraging plants that attract bees and pollinators in the appropriate locations. And then balancing ecological needs with environmental design. So there's we want to make sure those work together. And then also there's some other things that other programs that we're looking at that come from DFW and NWF that we would really like to see if we can sort of build into the code and have that be one of the considerations that we look at. Some key takeaways from the gap analysis that our consultant has done. Again, we've talked about multi-purpose landscape opportunities. So it's more than just aesthetics, more than just, buffering. If we can also incorporate stormwater, tree preservation, those kinds of things in the same place, that would be excellent. We're looking at ways we can be innovative and flexible in terms of our standards, but still getting what we want from the projects that are coming forward. We're looking at sustainability reuse, topsoil, water, those kinds of things. Design flexibility involving native plants. We talked about water conservation, habitat preservation. This would also be a way of supporting all those other things that we say we want to do in the code through landscaping. And then finally, the crime prevention through environmental design. This is primarily designing sites and landscaping to make sure we don't create safety hazards, blind spots that people can't be seen in, those kinds of things. That's what that means. We're going to be having community conversations for the landscape update as well. I'll tell you about the dates in a moment, but we're really going to be focusing on the water conservation side, how to minimize impervious surfaces, and in the sense that in landscaped areas, how much, say, river rock or bark or other things that aren't plants can be used, or do we want to really minimize that? We want to have a discussion about ways to reduce turf and grass as much as possible, things that require a lot of maintenance and a lot of water. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about landscaping development regulations for single family versus where we currently require it now. Do we want to consider that, or do we want to leave that out of the equation right now? And there are good reasons for both.
Brad,
So-
in conversation in landscaping about rain gardens and, capturing rainwater and having, there's some beautiful landscaping that goes along with, a rain garden kind of an outfit. And I know some individual people who have gone to that in a section of their yard or front or back or something, and it's beautiful, and it also is conserving the water that we're given from above.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if that's somewhere in the conversations.
Yeah,
And
that's
there are people who consult on that for both, like a city and a family.
that's definitely an area that we're trying to encourage more discussion between, say, the engineers designing the stormwater facilities that meet our current stormwater manual that have such features, and the landscaping designers for the plant selection and so forth that goes into those. Definitely is something we want to see more of. One thing that we do want to be mindful of is how to make sure that those things are maintained, not only to serve their stormwater function, but also, look decent. There are things that obviously would function just fine as the stormwater side, but may look to the eye not terribly nice. So we're trying to figure out ways to balance those two things.
You put that one in your backyard.
Mhm. So again, I'd like to share some dates for upcoming community conversations for the landscaping code update. Our first community conversation will be March 13 at 7 o'clock in the fire training room. Again, that would be a hybrid meeting. And then our second community conversation will be April 3rd. I believe that's a Monday, also at 7 p.m., excuse me.
Yeah.
We're not the GGC.
Sure.
So those will be the two formal times we'll be going out to the public ahead of producing any of the language for an ordinance. We'll be following a similar path for this. I believe we're looking at July, August for when the ordinance for this will probably be ready. And also I want to let you know the Tumwater Tree City website has all of 3 updates for the tree preservation, street tree, and landscaping. So we've been putting all the documentation and notices on that website going forward.
Could you say that one more time?
On the project website, we have been including the information for all 3 of the projects. So all the gap analysis, all that are all on that website. And I'm quickly trying to get the website number here. Let's see. It will take me a moment, but go ahead. We might want to consider if there are any other questions.
I guess the one looking at the participation outline, right? I see planning commission, tree board, planning commission, tree board. Does it make sense for planning commission, tree board, and council to get together in that, or no? Because I don't see that anywhere.
Yeah, I think that is definitely open for discussion. I think for example, when we're dealing with the tree preservation side of things, yes, I think that's going to be we really should all talk together moment. I'm not so sure, and maybe also with the street tree, I'm not so sure about the landscaping code. Unless there are particular things that you think that we should talk about together, that one I think we don't probably need to do it as much as the first 2. So
I just know that I've heard from 2 people on planning commission and 1 person on tree commission that they would like more contact with council. So maybe I was thinking, like, could this be an example where we have more engagement with them, subject matter, right? I'm just trying to take their feedback and go, what would that look like for what subjects? And I was like, well, this could be an interesting one.
So it would be the street tree, not the preservation, you're saying, with the council?
no, I'm thinking both the street tree and the tree preservation, because I think those are definitely the council definitely has a strong interest, and I think this is where I think it's important that they hear directly from your advisory boards on the discussions they've been having and the issues that they've been talking about and some of their thoughts and concerns on those things.
Thanks, Brad.
And again, the website for all 3 of these projects is Tumwater Tree City. That's all one word.com.
Say it one more time, please.
Tumwater Tree City, all one word, .com.
Thank you. It's easy enough to share with my neighbors. They've been asking how they can look at this.
Yeah, on the first page of that website is who do I contact and how do I sign up for more information? So all of that is immediately available there.
Great.
Any other final thoughts or last questions before we move on to our final agenda item here?
I just want
hearing. Oh,
Could I
go ahead,
just
Joe.
Brad, if you've gotten any questions or any feedback or any whatever, in talking about what we're talking about here, you know, the landscaping and the preservation and trying to conserve water and how we handle that and so forth. Have you gotten any comment, feedback about, but yet we're willing to give up millions of gallons of water to a plant that is, to an industrial plant that is going to cause pollution and has got a very bad reputation? Have you heard that? We're telling people they should conserve water. The city wants to do that, but yet we also think we have years worth of water that we can supply.
We've definitely heard that as through some of the comments related to the project and also outside of the project.
Yeah. Mhm. I've had some people ask me about that. Okay, I just wondered if, I was just randomly hearing things because I'm, they know I'm interested in all this, or if that was something people were picking up on, and I think it is a little broader than I thought at first. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. If there are no further questions or thoughts on that, our next item is the contract award for the Phase 3 grant with WDFW for the Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan. Takes away, Brad.
So, all right. So thank you for hanging in here on topic number 5. We have finally have been able to work out the contract with WDFW for Phase 3 of the Habitat Conservation Plan. We are in the process of winding down Phase 2 of the grant, which was awarded in 2018. We're looking at potentially extending a portion of that because there is funding still in that grant to cover our environmental review of the Habitat Conservation Plan that we haven't been able to start yet because we're still working through the final draft language with US Fish. And so we may run phases at the same time is what it may come down to. But for our purposes today, the Phase 3 grant is really intended to fund the completion of the plan up to the point of adoption, and also to fund a lot of activities that we need to undertake in the next year to prepare for the implementation of the Habitat Conservation Plan. And that means everything from preparing the documents that an applicant would need to submit, the processes that staff would need to follow in order to review those applications and process them, as well as the ongoing monitoring and reporting that is needed on the annual basis back to the service on how we're doing. So there's a number of different things that we've identified in the scope of the contract that we'll be working on that support that effort. The grant that we're going to be that is part of this contract is for $225,000. The funds are from US Fish and Wildlife, and it's managed by WFW. There will be a match that the city and the port will need to make of $79,000. That will be split evenly between the jurisdictions, and we've been making that match through both cash and staff time as part of our accounting process. A portion of the grant will also be going to WFW to provide additional technical assistance, and WFW will also be providing a match for those funds. The recommended action from staff, would like to revise what's on the agenda sheet, is that we would like to put this on council consent for March 21st as part of this process. Are there any questions that you may have about this particular contract?
I don't have any. Leah, I saw you shake your head, but Joan, do you have any?
No, I just want to get this stinking plan approved and done.
Yes, thank you.
So-
We don't disagree.
I don't think we need to use the word stinking in the thing for council, but in the papers that we're going to be, when you write up what this is on the agenda, I don't know if there's a few lines just to review and let people know this is not something brand new. This is a continuation is really good. And if they think that's stinky, that's up to them.
Yeah.
that we need to get on?
One thing I would like to make you aware of is that we have a working draft that has that we've responded to a series of comments from the service and WFW that has been sent back to the service on Monday for their review. In addition to that, we have a stakeholder process that's restarting with the first meeting in March and the second meeting in April. And those stakeholders represent about 35 different organizations in the community have received a copy of the working draft. So that will be part of the discussion process. Once we have gone through that, we'll probably look at scheduling a community meeting to go to the larger public about what we're doing and issue a public draft. There's a couple issues that we're still working out with the service, but we decided we need to get this out again because there's more than enough things to talk about now that we need to be talking about.
Very good. I'm glad we're starting to do that early in this long, late process.
All right. Any other burning questions? So this will be on the consent. Is there a motion to approve contract award for the phase 3 grant with WDFW for the Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan?
So move. This is Leetta.
Is that did you say second, Joan?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
I wasn't saying.
Sorry, couldn't hear you. It's a motion by Councilmember Doff and a second by Councilmember Kathy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes unanimously. That brings us to the end of our agenda, unless there are any additional items. Don't see any. And then with that, I guess we are adjourned 1 minute over. Very close.
Nice work.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you at the next one.
No. Mm.